All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our January 13th STEM Learning Community. This is made possible by funding through STEM Next, which is a part of our Million Girls Moonshot grant. We also have support from our active learning community partners today, two of which you'll hear from for today's presentation, which we are welcoming the Science Center of Iowa to do so. Appreciate you being active participants. We'll have time for a question and answer when the presentation part is done. And then we also want people to be able to feel free to do some networking during this event as well. So if you have tried things in your STEM programming that have really worked, if you've done things that maybe didn't go so well for you, like to be able to hear those and use each other as a sounding board for problem solving as well. And then last but not least, if anybody's in need of any resources, let's bring them to the discussion today then as well. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce Renee Harmon and Patrick Rice from the Science Center. I'll let them kind of give you an update on what they do over there, and I will go ahead and grab the presentation then. So thank you.
Greetings, everybody. My name is Renee Harmon, and I am the Vice President of Science Learning at the Science Center of Iowa. My apologies in advance. I'm having some technology difficulties, so let's fingers crossed I'm not going to freeze up, but my computer is frozen, so I can't see you. So Crystal, I'm going to need some help, and maybe Patrick could help as well with the slides. But so thrilled to be with you all today, and really looking forward to diving into underrepresented populations and serving and supporting that arm of STEM, and would like to welcome Patrick to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Patrick Rice. I'm the Director of Learning Experiences here at the Science Center of Iowa. And my main responsibilities include overseeing school visits, on-site visits, specifically when it comes to the programming aspect, outreach visits where we go out and travel, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And I also oversee and with a team work on our diversity and inclusion work here at the Science Center of Iowa too. So so this topic and this work is really something that is important to me, and something that I value and try to embed in all of our experiences here at the Science Center.
For sure. Thanks so much, Patrick. Patrick and I are both members of the Iowa Active Learning Community Partnership, and have been since the inception of the work that we've been doing here in partnership with all these great institutions. But as we were talking about our approach today, we wanted to just give you some information about the Science Center itself, because some of you may not know about the Science Center. And so this gives us an opportunity to introduce you to the Science Center if you haven't been. We invite you in the chat to let us know if you've been to the Science Center or you've used the services of the Science Center before. But just really briefly, the Science Center is an institution that's located here in central Iowa. It was founded in 1970, so many years ago, over 50 years ago. The Science Center was launched here locally, and it is one of the first interactive science museums in North America, which is a really exciting thing for us to be able to share with people about the importance that our founders felt was critical to a successful community to host interactive experiences focused on science. In 1975, we took that step even one step further in establishing a Science Center of Iowa preschool. Early learning has been part of our foundation here at the Science Center, and we're going to talk about some things that we do here at the Science Center to really create that foundation of STEM and science learning, even at the inception of life. In 2005, the Science Center moved to its current location, which is downtown on MLK Parkway. And annually, you would see the Science Center serving more than 300,000 visitors annually. So that's an exciting opportunity for us to engage Iowans on their journey of science learning, which is the mission of the Science Center, engaging and inspiring all of Iowans on their journey of science learning. And we do that in a way that is focused on that value of making sure that our experiences are safe, that we are welcoming all to our institution, whether our institution is coming into our facility or going out across the state of Iowa. We do that with compassion, ensuring that we do that with integrity of information and content, and do that in an innovative way. And those are all part of those values that we have here at the Science Center. I did mention that we are the Science Center of the state of Iowa, and we truly focus in on that. As Patrick was sharing, we have vans that go across the state to deliver services for outreach, workshops. We go into classrooms to help support the STEM learning that's happening in our classrooms, and that touches 99 of our counties annually. And what does that look like? That's, again, those school visits that we have. It is live demonstrations. It is science camps. Patrick has been the leader of our youth science camp program, and that is not only invites youth into our facility, but we also do camps in other locations as well. Patrick's going to be sharing again some of those opportunities that we have, because we see ourselves as a really important, we see ourselves as a resource for all Iowans, whether they can come into our facility or whether we are reaching out to them. Whether that's us physically coming to your institution or providing resources for your institution in some way. Maybe that's professional development for after-school educators, or it's our Spark Lab that's coming on the road and delivering a program for after-school participants. But in whatever way that it meets your needs, we are looking for being that resource. We also wanted just to highlight that because we are the Science Center of Iowa, we are very intentional about serving all audiences, from that very early learner, that young investigator who is just learning about the world around them, to those who are at the end of their career or potentially even at the end of their life. And how do we continue to inspire and engage that mind and to uphold that passion for learning? And we identify those as specifically as segments of our audiences. I've talked to you about how we have an on-site preschool that serves over 112 kiddos at the ages of 3 and 4, but we also have programs that go into schools called Pint-Sized Science for those early learners, our outreach classes. We specifically look at our youth audience of serving both on-site for school visits, for special events like a bridge building competition that happens here at the Science Center, to those camps and labs that we offer. And today we're going to dive in a little bit to our Girls in Science initiative, which is around that diversity and inclusion aspect of STEM learning with our early and mid-career adults, as well as our lifelong learners. We're looking at things like free experiences around recent research in science that is happens in our Cafe Scientifique program, as well as things like a mixology program that invites adults, an adult-only event where visitors can come into our facility and play with science. So that just gives you a brief overview of our audiences. But Patrick, if you'd like to talk a little bit about those resources that we provide for after-school groups, that would be wonderful.
Definitely. Crystal, if you could just go to the next slide. The only thing you'll see here is just our logo, or actually one back. I mentioned that one of the programs that I oversee is our outreach program. Our outreach program is designed to bring the Science Center across the state. So it's a resource for you that you don't have to come to Des Moines and come to the Science Center specifically to take advantage of the opportunities that are available. So we realized back in maybe 2014-15 timeframe, we invited some after school and formal educators to the building, and we were asking them questions about how can we be better partners with school districts and after school organizations across the state. And one of the comments we received was, it would be great if you had a van filled with like science experiments that you could come to our sites and deliver. And we were like, we clearly have not been doing a good job of marketing our program that we've been offering since 1970. So we want to make sure that we get that word out to everyone available. We do have some virtual options as well as in-person options for our outreach experiences. Those could be everything from electrical engineering type of experiences to we have not during the winter, extreme winter months, but we do have some animals that travel on the road as well. So we have some live animals that we've taken to different communities. And so we do have a pretty large offering of our outreach experiences, if that is of interest to you. Recently, the Science Center has created one of our new initiatives that is focused on innovation also. We took that idea of inspiring innovation and that next generation of thinkers and doers, and we created an innovation lab that was hosted here on site. So it's a physical room here at the Science Center. We've used that to do everything from camps and workshops and after school experiences that is really focused on combining low tech and high tech opportunities. About perfect timing, early 2020, we launched a mobile version of the Innovation Lab called our Spark Lab. And as you are probably aware, it didn't move very often, but we are starting to get the wheels rolling on the mobile Spark Lab again. It did travel quite a bit this summer, but that is another opportunity. It's very similar to the outreach experiences where we come to you and we deliver an activity or a workshop on site. The difference is that it is that not the traditional 30 to 45 minute educational based program necessarily, that it's we have some volunteer interaction and program delivery. It is really focused on that workshop experience, so and lab experience. So the participants are actively doing and attaching wires and again, like I said, a combination of that low tech and high tech experiences. So we're instructing that coding experiences and learning how to play a piano using bananas. And so that Innovation Spark mobile lab is a newer opportunity that is available as well. Next slide.
So that brings us to the topic that we are here to talk about today. So really appreciate that you all are very interested in this topic that's really important to us here at the Science Center, but also the Iowa Active Learning community, who really felt like this was an important topic to put on these community conversations that we are having, not only as an opportunity to network, but for us to each learn and grow about how do we serve underrepresented populations and underserved populations. Specifically today, we're going to talk a little bit about girls in science and girls in STEM. And as we were thinking about how do we approach and help support that, we wanted to talk a little bit about how we came to really focus in on girls in science here at the Science Center of Iowa. It will be of no surprise to any of you. I could give you all kinds of statistics about the underrepresented status of women in the STEM fields, but it is important for us to say it, that women, no matter how much work that we have been doing in this area, continue to be underrepresented in science. It's not just science, but the engineering workforce. And although it's reduced, it continues to see specific disparities in the engineering and computer science area. For more than 20 years, women have been focused in on, the percentage has been reducing, but in engineering, it's flattened out. So we've come over these 20 years, we're still reducing and ensuring, but there's now only 18 to 21% of that workforce in engineering that are female. In computer science, we've seen that decline from 28% of women, even down to 19% of women in the workforce. So these are statistics that we can't turn away from, because we know how important it is that we continue to search for that balance and representation, so that we're attending to why it matters. Why does it matter that we have representation of women in the STEM fields? I'd love to invite you to think about that and share those comments in our chat today. Why do you think it's important that we attend to even at our youngest levels, thinking about the equality of women in the STEM workforce. I'll just give everybody a minute to think about that.
Yeah, and again, drop your comments into the chat, or if you're comfortable, you could unmute and join the conversation that way as well. I also, while you're thinking, it would be greatly appreciated if you would also drop your name into the chat. I neglected to say that at the beginning. That's just kind of a nice way that we keep track of who participates in these calls here.
Thanks, Krista. Anybody interested in identifying why they think it's important? Why does it matter?
Not seeing anything yet. So if you don't mind, I'll jump in here real quick. For me, it's a personal reason. I have 2 daughters, and both of my daughters are interested in entering into the STEM field. I have one that's studying to be a veterinarian at Iowa State. She's in her junior year of undergraduate right now. And then my high schooler is a junior in high schooler, and she plans to go into nursing. So again, STEM related fields. One thing that I would say of note, though, that was interesting to me is that when the girls were younger, they had an opportunity to participate in a computer science class, and neither of them were really terribly interested in that. And when I asked them, why don't you want to do that? And their comment to me was, well, it's just kind of a boy thing. And a little part of my heart broke that day. So I think it's important that we as providers and we as professionals continue to offer and encourage and support those girls to think about taking a step, being interested in those types of things. To your point, Renee, that, we know that these are growing employment fields and we have kind of a shrinking percentage of women in them. So how can we as providers do our best to promote those opportunities to girls? And I'll be quiet now and let other people give their thoughts.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Crystal said. I have a son, a 6-year-old, and then I have a 3-year-old daughter. And I can remember vividly being in a college course and they talked about young girls tend to be complimented on appearance or how they look, or and boys tend to be complimented on their actions and how that just perpetuates over life. And my family jokes like my daughter's made me say, never say Maeve's cute or Fiona will lose it. But and while it is a joke, I have just observed with my own 2 personal children that my son is very, very complimented on his actions. And he has a STEM brain and he is into programming and like Legos and loves it, but he also gets a lot of affirmation in that field. And my daughter is adorable and is complimented by strangers all the time on her adorableness. And I do think every time I hear it, I think, thank you. And in the back of my head, I think, and just inside of our own personal families, the gifts that are given to the different children by grandparents and stuff. My son gets Legos, my daughter gets dolls. And when I make the list, I make them a little bit more similar, but a lot of times you get given things by well-meaning people. And I do understand why. And yes, my 3-year-old does not have the interest in Legos and in the things that my son had at that point in his life. And so there is partially inherently in some children a drive towards that or not. But I also can't help but wonder how much of that is because when you twirl at the grocery store, you get some oohs and ahs. So.
Great. Thank you for that, Fiona. We also have a comment in the chat that women make up more than 50% of the nation's population. It would be tragic for us as a nation to miss out on the incredible potentials of women. So thank you for that too.
Tragic indeed. And that is exactly why we're talking about this. And we'll continue to talk about equity in a variety of ways, not just with gender. And research is very clear about why it matters. It is an important part of the workforce, but also collectively, we know that when women are represented in these workforces, in this particular workforce, that increases our innovation. It increases the creativity towards innovation. it is critical for those unique perspectives, a different perspective than what is typical with a male-dominated workforce, STEM workforce. It also collectively boosts our economy. It increases our productivity, and it results in more accurate scientific reasoning. So these are all important pieces. And then how do we close the gap on that? Knowing how important that is, what are those strategies and things that we can do to help close that gap in a continual way? I wanted to share very quickly that this is something that is not only touching corporate workforce, nonprofit workforce in the STEM areas, but also NASA itself is addressing these inequities. And most recently, I'm sure you're all aware of that they have launched what is the most powerful space telescope ever. Who knows what it is? You may want to shout it out. Okay, I'll say it's the James Webb. And you probably heard about it in the news. And this is an important step for NASA. When NASA was approaching whose research proposals were going to be approved to use this tool in space, they took their work one step further in the effort for equity. Typically, proposals are brought in for how to use those tools, and their individuals would attach their name. They would potentially give a presentation so that there would be some unconscious bias or prejudice to the proposals that were selected. Now, I'm not only saying that because we think that happened. We actually know that happened because NASA did the research. They actually employed a researcher to analyze what they saw happen with the Hubble Space Telescope, which has happened as well more recently. And they did an analysis of the proposals that were submitted to use the Hubble Space Telescope, and then who was actually selected to use that tool. And they found there was clearly some bias. There was clearly prejudice, and it was not favorable to women. So in approaching the James Webb Telescope and how they were going to choose those proposals of using that tool, they decided to do a blind proposal process, removing names, removing that visual, and look solely at the science and solely at what was stated in the proposal without those lenses of what an individual looked like, but purely looking at the science. And the results were positive. More than half of the proposals that were selected were women scientists. And that was not the case in the Hubble Space Telescope. So I share that only as an example of how we are collectively all trying to rise the ship, how we are all collectively trying to approach this. And that's one of the things that the Science Center has kept in mind as they've approached this work themselves in our programming. So our programming has started many years ago, but also focused on raising the equity in girls in science or female representation in science. We have done that work with utilizing a variety of strategies to make sure that we're supporting that equity. And we join you all that are on this call in that work in informal learning on starting that work at an early age to help girls see themselves as STEM professionals. The Girls in Science program is an initiative, and it works to promote that early and prolonged engagement in STEM, recognizing that if we engage girls in an experience that tells them that STEM is for them, that one of the results of that is as they are choosing their trajectory in their career, that they will see themselves as a STEM professional and opening their eyes of the possibilities that are in front of them when it comes to becoming a STEM professional in that diverse workforce. So we've done that work with supporting the understanding of what research tells us about learning and how girls learn best. And we've done that work in partnership with the Twin Cities PBS and National Girls Collective. and they established what is called the Sci Girls program. And that Sci Girls is working in partnership with, again, supporting girls in STEM work. And they have outlined, they have done the collective research to analyze what are those things that will better engage girls in science and STEM work. And they've identified those 7 characteristics of good informal learning to rise the potential for girls to follow that journey of STEM. And they are 7 very quick strategies. They won't be shocking to you. And I'll tell you also that although they are specific to girls, when done well, each of these 7 characteristics also help support boys in STEM too. So I just want to very quickly give that highlight of those 7 things. Girls benefit for collaboration. So they feel like they can ultimately fully participate and communicate when they are working in tandem with others. So making sure that our experiences are highlighting that collaboration is a really great way to rise that interest in STEM. They also found that the research shows that girls are more motivated by projects that they think are relevant to themselves, relevant and meaningful, that they're making a difference in. They also enjoyed open-ended projects, and that projects that are hands-on and investigation-based. The 4th characteristic of good informal learning for girls is focused on the motivation lens. Girls are more motivated when they can approach projects in their own way. So instead of us saying, this is the journey that we're on and solving this problem, giving them the opportunity to approach those projects, which allows them to apply their own creativity, bring together their own talents and their preferred learning styles. The 5th characteristic of good approaches is focused around building their confidence. When we build girls' confidence in their STEM learning, their performance improves. Not anything earth-shattering, right? Because any one of us as individuals, our performance is going to rise if we are given the opportunity, and we are given the opportunity to give, we are given specific positive feedback, and that we are focused on improvement rather than being told that we are good at something, but that feedback gives descriptions on how we can get better in that work. We also know that girls gain confidence and trust when they are encouraged to think critically. So challenging their thinking, but also giving them space in which to apply that critical thinking. And the final characteristic from the Sci Girls 7 is that relationships matter. Again, nothing earth-shattering and nothing that many of us may not already know in our work, is that the relationships with girls are critical to their success. And that starts with having role models and mentors that look like them. They are more likely to see, if they see a female in those roles or in those jobs, they are more likely to see themselves as potentially fulfilling those roles or jobs in the future. So those are important characteristics that we have to pay close attention to when we're addressing gender equity in STEM. So the Science Center took that approach of the research that tells us of those 7 characteristics that are important in STEM learning and applied those to a variety of programs. And we're just sharing those today just so that you know, just to dip your toe in the understanding of the Girls in Science project that we lead here at the Science Center. We host annually a Girls in Science pajama party. This is an opportunity where we invite young girls ages 8 through 15 to think about what they want to do when they grow up. This is a pajama event where we dress up in our pajamas and then we dance, and we also engage in science collaboratively. We have mentors who help lead those activities side by side with these girls who are in a very social opportunity. And we do a lot of work on working with our mentors side by side, but also providing them opportunities to ask questions of those mentors. That is, again, just one of those opportunities that we provide them. Another opportunity that we provide in our Girls in Science initiative is what is called our Meals with Mentors program. This is focused specifically on girls in grades ages 7 through 12, where we host a very formal event where we have mentors who are working scientists who sit at a variety of tables with girls. We have a formal dinner and a formal presentation, and we help them have opportunities just to have conversation with these individuals in the STEM fields. Conversations that include, what does it cost to become a doctor? Or what education did you need to get to become a computer software engineer? What are those things that, are you able to balance being a parent and being a professional and pay back your loans? All of those things are tables, conversations that happen at this event, but it really focuses in on helping girls see themselves with mentors side by side, as well as providing them an opportunity to participate in an activity that is STEM based. And Patrick's going to walk us through one of those activities that we've done both at the Pajama Party as well as the Meals with Mentor program. Another program that we have is called Coffees and Careers, again, inviting girls to learn about the careers that women have in the STEM field. If you see yourself or understand those careers that are options for you, we do what we see. And if we see new and different opportunities, we may have the interest in following that trajectory of that career. So that is a formal event that we have those who are working in the field talk about the work that they are doing, as well as Girls in Science camps. So these are camps that are provided for youth over the summer, focused in on utilizing those SciGirls 7 tips and experiences and activities that are focused on specifically girls. The last one that I want to talk to you about today is our Girls in Science Festival, which is an annual festival where we bring in a variety of companies, organizations, STEM professionals who share activities with girls and their families in a very social experience and an open day here at the Science Center. Those, again, focused in on those role models, as well as having an opportunity to engage in an activity focused in STEM. So again, that just gives you a very brief overview of some of those experiences, but I'd like to invite Patrick to talk about one example of how we've used the SciGirls 7 and balance what we've continually talked about in these conversations, the DOS framework for evaluation of quality STEM learning, and how that might look in, how that specifically looks in an activity that we do called Squishy Circuits.
Gotcha. Thank you. And
Patrick,
yeah,
pardon the interruption for just a moment. I do want to just call out that we had somebody else drop into the chat their reason for encouraging girls to become involved in STEM. It's because women have a unique way data keeping and seeing solutions in a variety of ways. It's important to have a variety of strategies to solve science, technology, art, and math. I believe women can bring another perspective. So wanted to call that out before you hopped into your squishy circuits here.
I'm glad you did, because I was going to do the exact same thing. So, so thank you. So yeah, what we want to make sure we do is also provide you an opportunity of an experience that we have offered in the past in a variety of different ways with our Girls in Science initiative. Squishy Circuits is nothing that is, if you Google Squishy Circuits, you'll find lots of different either recipes or curriculum or lesson plans, pictures. This is not anything that the Science Center of Iowa has created solely here in Des Moines, and it's our own property or anything like that. So Squishy Circuits is just one of those activities that we found is a great way to combine a lot of the techniques, specifically with the SciGirls 7, into an activity that is fun, engaging, and also very collaborative as well. So the format that you see, though, of the Squishy Circuits lesson, this framework is unique to the Science Center and to the the Active Learning Community Partners. This is a format that this group has developed using the Dimensions of Success evaluation tool. So this is not something that you will see by Googling necessarily Squishy Circuits, but because this is a unique format for this group. How this is laid out is that the Dimensions of Success evaluation tool is a tool that allows people to evaluate a STEM learning experience to find out where it actually, how good of a quality of experience it really is. We all want to make sure that we are providing high quality experiences, but are the experiences that we're providing relatable? Are they appropriate for the age group, or is it appropriate in the space that we're using, or do we have the right materials? And so it gives you a little bit of a guidance of what to be thinking about. So this is laid out, first of all, by having what area of the STEM, what STEM focus area it's going to be focused on. So of course, this is in engineering and technology. This is more about electrical engineering. It has a defined STEM learning goal, and that's probably one of the more critical pieces of the entire tool, is that it gives you something to focus on. So it's not an activity to just fill time necessarily, but what is every part of this lesson doing to move me towards achieving that STEM learning goal? So it allows you to kind of step back and think about like, this is really fun, but does it move us forward towards that goal or not? And so you start weeding out some things that you might have initially thought of incorporating into the lesson, simply because it may not move you towards that STEM learning goal. So that's probably one of the more critical pieces of this evaluation tool itself. We have youth learning targets. So we have target areas where we want to make sure that we are achieving. And then we start with just focusing on the learning environment space, the area that we're going to be in. So we think about how long is this going to take? What type of classroom or what type of room setup should this look like? How large of a room should this be in? Some of these things we can't control. We understand that a lot of after-school programs is taking place on half of the side of the gym, while the other half of the gym is basketball practice. So a lot of these things we may not be able to control. But if we do have that ability to have that control of those features, how do we make sure that we are thinking forward through that? The age is really important too. We have some activities that are really fun, but maybe not most appropriate for an 8-year-old. Maybe it's more appropriate for a 10 to 11-year-old. And so you start thinking about what grade levels these are appropriate for. It has that guiding question of what is that question that we're going to be exploring as we are, or what are those questions that we're going to be exploring as we move throughout this activity. And then also some preparation. So we know that we can't just go into this blinded. As a facilitator, we have to be able to know what a little bit of stuff we have to be prepared for. So, so it just talks briefly about what is that preparation that the facilitator needs to have done ahead of time. Crystal, can you go to the next slide? Perfect. All right. So this one now moves us into the preparation. So we've been focusing on with the DOS evaluation tool, the features of the STEM learning environment. Now we're kind of going into the organization and the materials and that type of thing. So we list out our materials. These are very specific to the squishy circuit activity, but we'll talk a little bit later about, is this really necessary? Or should we just say we need some flour versus exactly how much flour do we need? We look at that with the organization of this activity is to make sure that you've practiced either the technology involved with it or the activity itself. So you've prepared any materials that or the supplies that are needed ahead of time. If you feel like some things might need to be measured out ahead of time versus others, that you've done that prep work. The materials selection also is important to make sure that they are appropriate for teaching the learning goals, so that the youth would be able to use them instead of just seeing you use them instead. And also making sure that they're appealing to them. Again, back to that space utilization and making sure that the space, whatever space you're in, is set up appropriately and that there's no safety issues or distractions. And the biggest one also is probably just that relevance piece. It's like, why do I care? How do you make this relatable to their life? And that's through asking questions about how are you able to connect this activity with why it's important to them. All right, and go ahead and go to the next slide, please. I'm doing the same on my notes. All right, perfect. I love Having a literacy connection. I know that Renee echoes that as well. That is something that was important for many of our lessons and many of our activities, is that there is some type of literacy connection that you can just either bring into it. We do that with our summer reading program, which is an outreach program focused with our library systems, where we have a book or a couple books associated with the program that we're offering as well. So we try to involve a couple of those, or have a couple of those books that you might be able to reference or have on hand as well. The purposeful activities is the piece to make sure that we're getting that we're introducing the section and getting the purposeful activities is the introduction section to get us on track for that to start achieving that learning goal. So that's setting the course for why is this important and how are we going to move this forward. The inquiry piece that you see highlighted are just questions that are prompts for the facilitator. These are by no means the only questions you should ask. These are just simply prompts of some things you could think about. This one in Squishy Circuits, if you're not familiar with this activity, it's basically making two different types of dough. One is a conductive dough, one is an insulator type of dough. And you can choose or not choose to have food coloring in each of the two different types of doughs. And so one of the questions listed in the inquiry is, does the food coloring affect the dough? Does it affect the conductivity of the dough? Does one color make it more conductive or the better insulator for some? So those are just type of questions that you can prompt and ask, but by no means these are the only questions that you should ask. The relationship piece, that is another very critical piece in any type of positive learning environment, is making sure that we're making a welcome and friendly environment. That goes back to that one of the Seigel 7 statements of just making sure that we have a positive relationship. And again, how am I able to start that journey and guide youth in a sustained discussion of why these activities are relatable to their everyday lives? And next slide. All right, and then this gets you into the meat and the bones. So now we're actually going to do the activity. So while we're doing the activity, you want to make sure that you're focused in on making sure that all the youth have access to the activity. How many times have we done something where we've set one microscope into a group and we have four youth or 4 students having to share one microscope? Where do we set the microscope? Who do we set it in front of? Who takes charge? So making sure that every youth participating has access to the materials in the activity. Again, making sure that we're moving all of our activities are moving us towards that STEM learning goal, making sure that the youth are physically and mentally engaged with their hands and their minds while this is going on. And then also asking those questions during this core time of the activity to help them make sense of what they're actually doing. So starting to see those connections. This is also going to start encouraging or start inspiring and creating a sense of enthusiasm around the activity as well. Now, you'll notice in here that I think it was on the slide before that we actually have some, or actually no, it's right here where it says, sorry, Crystal, I misread it. Yep, it says activity instructions, and in italicized it says for the facilitator notes only for guidance. This is important specifically to this activity because one of the most inspiring things to see is to watch people figure out what is the right recipe to make the best conductive dough. This is great because here, these are the step-by-step instructions. In the material list, it said a cup and a half or a cup and a quarter of this and 3 tablespoons of this. That's for the facilitator primarily, but it's so amazing to watch youth figure that out on their own. Yes, it's going to get messy. Yes, there's going to be a lot of, there might be some more materials used than what if you gave them pre-measured amounts, but there's that learning that happens of like, oh, this is too watery. What do I need to add to make it a little bit more dough-like versus gooey. And so you can start helping guide them through that and figuring out, hey, this one I added salt, this one I didn't add salt, this one conducts electricity. I wonder what is that, what's that material, or what is that ingredient that causes that? And so you're starting to able to prompt those questions. Again, it's very important for, I think, the facilitator to have kind of some understanding of what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to do. But again, this is more so for the facilitator notes than it is for to hand out to the youth. The next steps section at the very end, and I know we're kind of running a little long on time, I'm sorry. The next step is also really a cool little addition to this, where it's, you can take it one step further. In this example is encourage youth to link their circuits together from one battery source to observe what occurs. That's a really great example of showing a collaboration, but also understanding is like, if I have the same number of batteries producing the same amount of power, but I'm now trying to light 6 different lights, why is this light at the very end really, really, really dim? And that brings you into a whole new discussion about just electrical use, the power grid, how that fluctuates throughout the day, how my electrical uses impact my household, but also impact the community. It allows you to bring in electrical engineers for that mentor connection. So it's just a huge way of expanding this one little activity of making conductive dough and making something light up to, wow, now I can actually see this applied in my house and my community and my state. All right, and next slide. And these are just a couple pictures just to add at the very end to show you what the squishy circuits are kind of looking like. You can see the excitement in that one photo that was just captured perfectly. And again, the relevance and reflection piece is also really invaluable at this time to just understand, like, what were those challenges that we faced when we were creating these our conductive dough? What are the design process what design process are we in at this stage? What are some ways that we can improve the electrical current? Do we add more of one ingredient? And does that impact the amount of conductivity that the dough has? So this framework, how this is laid out, is unique, like I said, to using the Dimensions of Success evaluation tool. But again, this activity is open to all kinds of people. Everybody has done, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people have done squishy circuits before. So this is just taking it one step further. Below, you'll see the SciGirl 7. Those are the statements that Renee had mentioned earlier. So we wanted to make sure that we had those in this recording. So we had those listed out. Again, this is a website that is open source that we'll provide in just a moment. And Crystal, can you go to the next slide? And one more click, maybe 4 more clicks. And this again is just so that will a review of that slide where of the audiences that Renee had mentioned earlier about how, yes, the Girls in Science Initiative is in our youth category, but it's so critical to have that high school experience as well as that early to mid-career experience, and also lifelong learners to really create that mentorship opportunities, to have the mentorship opportunities from middle school girls to elementary school girls, and making sure that we are creating that circle of opportunities for all the audiences that we have. And then the next slide. These are the 2 resources, the 2 links that I wanted to make sure that we showed you as well. The first one, it takes you to the SciGirl 7. Again, this is through the Twin Cities PBS. Again, with this being recorded, you'll have access to this. And then the if-then, the aztec.org if-then's the second link is a link that Renee, Renee had mentioned earlier, is a link that provides you with opportunities of a library to have images if you're interested in trying to have printed images of females in the workforce. This is a link that has been a valuable resource for us as well. And I'll stop there.
Great, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and open for questions now. And while you're formulating those, I do want to grab one from the chat that came a little earlier in the presentation. Patrick, I think this one is probably for you. Does the mobile lab from the Science Center have a cost? And can you talk a little bit more about the activities and the models? Also, do you do art?
Art specifically is embedded into a lot of our activities, as you can see with the squishy circuit. And I have to also let everyone know I'm at 5% battery and I'm not near a charger. So if I die, I'm sorry. So as you can see in the squishy circuit activity, you can take that art component into all kinds of levels. There was that one picture where they just literally had two does, one wrapped around the other, and then you had the other picture of one was actually a sculpted, I think, bear maybe. And so you can incorporate that into lots of different activities through the DOS evaluation tool. Specifically about the cost for the mobile lab, I would encourage you, I don't have those prices off the top of my head, but I know that they are available either on our website or by contacting us at sales@sciowa.org, which is just, or you can also do info at sciowa.org. And then we'd be able to get those specific costs to you, because I know that there's a lot of variables that go into it based on how long, who it's for, where we're going, what materials, those type of things. Yep.
I'm actually going to drop a link into the chat. It's our stemforiowa.org website. That's a couple of really cool things happen at this website. Number one, we do have direct links to each of our active learning community partners. So if you need to go to the Science Center, you can grab that logo and it'll take you right there. The second thing that I'd like to point out about this website is that's where our professional development recordings and materials live. So you can certainly go there and grab those. We also have some great newsletters and things of that nature. And then last but not least, we also have our lesson plan repository, where you can grab those lesson plans that Patrick indicated when he detailed through the squishy circuits materials. And they're designed to be downloaded and implemented by you or your direct service staff right away. So that is a website that you might want to put a bookmark to. And then Renee just dropped a comment in there. If you're specifically interested in the Spark Lab, she has a contact in there for you. And then also says that that lab provides workshops, residencies, classes, etc. And all have an art integrated aspect. So. All right, thank you for that. And again, Patrick, if we lose you, my thanks ahead of time here. So any other questions from the group today? Again, feel free to unmute or drop those into the chat.
I'll highlight real quick the stemforiowa.org site that Crystal dropped into the chat. That is a really it is and it will continue to be a very valuable resource for after school learning environments, specifically when you're looking for STEM education activities. That is going to be it is and it will continue to expand to be a repository of activities designed with this through the DOS, through the Dimensions of Success evaluation tool. So if you found like that format made sense, that's going to be a great resource for you to check out.
Yeah, thank you again for that plug. So, all right, any other questions or thoughts today? Okay, so I think all of you know how to get a hold of me. If you need to follow up for anything, feel free to shoot me an email and I'm happy to make connections for you. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.